It is week 3 of the federal election campaign, and while the politicians are busy making promises, the world around us is moving at breakneck speed. We have measles outbreaks in Ontario gaining steam. Trump's trade wars are rattling the world markets with a new major shot at China, and the Habs continue to hang in. From Montreal, this is episode 28 of Night Talk. I'm Gary MacDonald.
And floors up from Gary MacDonald in beautiful Montreal again. It's Eddie Takalik.
And welcome back to Montreal, Eddie.
Thank you.
Were you surprised by the white stuff on the ground?
You know what? We got home on Sunday. It was not so bad. Monday was okay. Went grocery shopping and then woke up this morning or woke up yesterday, whenever it was, like, what is all this white stuff on the ground? I'm used to white sand beaches, as you were saying, right? But yeah, I mean, it's all gone now, and now it's quite cold. You're going from 33 degrees Celsius to plus 1 or 2. It kind of bites you a little,
Yeah.
But apparently it's supposed to get better over the course of the week.
Yeah, I think we're going back to spring here shortly, so that's a good thing, seeing as we're almost into the middle of April. But that aside, There's lots to talk about tonight other than the weather. And just before we get started, a couple of things. If you haven't already, like, share, and subscribe. It always helps us to continue to grow the channel, and we do appreciate your support in that respect. And also tonight, we want to hear from you. A number of topics we're going to be discussing that, on the tips of the tongues of a lot of people, and we want to hear from you. We will share and respond to as many of your comments as possible. So let's get right into it. Ontario continues to struggle with an outbreak of measles. Other areas of the country are also dealing with a number of cases, as are some areas of the United States. Our New Brunswick contributor, Wayne MacDonald, is a retired doctor with a background in public health. Wayne, what is the latest on the measles situation?
Well, hi, folks. Glad to see you again. Sure. Before I do that, I just want to give a quick little thing on Measles 101. So when I start putting this into context, we'll have some background to that. So measles is caused by a virus, and it's regarded as the most highly infectious communicable disease known to humans. And when you say that, it's so infectious that its secondary attack rate, in other words, if somebody has measles and they are in an infectious state, they can infect 90% of the people who they come in contact who are not immune to measles. 90%, which is kind of the bar for how infectious a disease can be. The other point about how infectious it is that you can walk into a room where somebody has been who is infected with measles and, again, infectious. They have left the room 2 hours ago, and up to 2 hours later, you can catch measles because it's still in the air. It's in aerosol, it's in the air, or it's still on tables or things that you can touch that they may have coughed on or the virus has settled. 2 hours after you've left, they're not even in the room for 2 hours. And you can still get it. It doesn't take a lot of the virus to infect you. Others will take a little bit more, but so that's what you're dealing with. That's how infectious this is, and that's why it's a big deal in terms of how quickly it's spreading and why people are concerned about that. I think the other thing too is that when you look at the infections. So what measles basically it'll start with a fever, a tiredness feeling, a stuffed runny nose, a cough, you get some spots inside your mouth, and then about 4 days later, the rash appears. Some people I've talked to thought, well, the first thing is the rash. No, it doesn't appear until about 4 days after all these other symptoms start. And I was in practice back when, seeing a case of measles in a little infant that was, probably 10 months old, under 1, which is the first, when you get your first measles immunization. And that's a nasty disease on its own without the other part. And these are the complications. That's the other concern about measles, is that a lot of people who get measles, they'll have otitis media, which is the inner ear infection. They will get pneumonia, and they can develop encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain, which is obviously a serious thing to have. And if you can survive that, then you often are left with either being blind or deaf or other neurological problems. If you're pregnant and get measles, then you can have miscarriages, low birth weight babies, and premature labor. So these are issues that when you talk about measles, and I know when occasionally I talk to people, they'll say, well, it's just a childhood disease. Well, okay, it is, but it is one that is so highly infectious and has the ability for these complications that's why the medical community gets so concerned when they see that it's entering into their community. Now, Gary, you said Ontario was the hot spot, and that it is that in Canada. The last count I had, and it was updated a week ago. I didn't see today's update. They were over 660 cases, and they started in, I think, November, and it was linked to the outbreak in New Brunswick in the fall, where that produced 50 cases. And members of the main group that had the outbreak in New Brunswick traveled to Ontario and then started spreading it there. And it happens to be amongst a group that have very low immunization rates. So it's just spread. And I think Ontario also had a traveler from outside the country that brought some in as well. But I mean, Quebec's got around 50 cases. Manitoba's got some cases. Saskatchewan's got a small number of cases. BC has a smaller number of cases. But the province now to watch is Alberta. And they're starting to sound alarm bells because they're now up to about 43, 44 cases as of today, whereas 3 weeks ago they had like 12 or 14. And the thing about measles is the incubation period that is the time from you're exposed to the disease to the time you start to express the symptoms averages about 10 days. It can go a little longer, like maybe 17 days or even 19 days, but 10 is about the average. So it's not like a cold or a flu where if you're exposed to it and you're going to get it in 2 or 3 days, you've got it. It's 10 days, it's churning along, and you don't know who's going to get it and when. So, and then it's infectious from 4 days before you get the rash to 4 days after the rash begins. So that's about 8 days of being infectious. So you have to consider that too when you're looking at this. And to try and control it, I guess the point I want to emphasize is immunization is the method to control this. The immunization, the MMR, stands for measles, mumps, rubella. It's 3 combined into 1. Been around for years, decades. Safe, well proven. 1 dose gives you about 88 to 90% protection against measles. 2 doses will give you 95 to about 98% protection against measles. I'm not going to say 100 because no vaccine will give 100% protection. There's always a certain small portion of the population that through their immune system or how they respond to it, they either don't get full protection as the bulk of people do. So like that's 90% protection. And why is that important? Because it is so infectious that in order to have herd immunity, which means that you have enough people in your community that they are immunized and they are protected from the disease, so that if the disease enters in that area, that community, that it has nowhere to go. With 95% being immunized and protected against measles, it's just walled off. It'll just fizzle out. So 95%, that's fairly high, and that's the objective country set to try and establish herd immunity against measles. And it's so effective that it has to be emphasized. That's what can happen. But the problem is that the number of childhood immunizations and measles would be one of those, of course, has dropped. It started to drop a little bit before COVID, and that had to do with a little bit of um, you know, more of the anti-vax campaigns coming in, or information coming in, or misinformation, whatever you want to call it. And then there's a consideration too that for a lot of these childhood diseases, when their parents are taking their children to get immunized and they're told it's for this, 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 and this, most of the parents have never seen these diseases. They don't know what they are. They don't know how important they are. They don't know the devastating effects they can cause. And so I think there was a bit of complacency starting to creep in, because we're at the generation now where even the grandparents probably haven't seen or can recount the stories of what it's like to have these diseases. So I think there was that. But then COVID hit, and COVID disrupted everything. Of course, we had lockdowns. We had reduced access to a whole lot of things, from liquor stores to doctors' offices. I mean, in fact, some doctors' offices said if you have these symptoms, cancel your appointment. And resources were reallocated once the COVID vaccines came out to getting people vaccinated for COVID. So the whole schedule kind of got off the rails there, either through the system and through the individuals themselves. I mean, life got kind of turned upside down. The things that you're used to doing, the appointments you kept, everything got kind of put on hold. And it's taken a while to catch back up to that. And then there was a little bit, I think, of, again, this kind of anti-vax thing when the first mRNA vaccines came out for COVID, and maybe one of the other ones, they were only approved on a very quick basis, that kind of thing. Are they safe? This, that, and the other thing. I think we overcame that, but I think some of it hung over to the normal childhood diseases. And I think there's vaccine fatigue in there as well. When I say that, when the COVID vaccines came out, it was, you need 2-3 months apart, the first couple. And then, now we need one at another 6 months. Now we need one at another 6 months. And now we need, it just kept going on for a couple of years. And I think people just got sort of, like I say, vaccine fatigue. And that's another reason why I rates are down. And I think that the other thing I'm going to be maybe a little, I'll be provocative about. I think too that public health through COVID, I mean, they worked hard, they did a good job, but from where I sat, they're also doing a job trying to navigate politicians and government, as well as do their job as public health professionals in trying to control a disease. And, I think it was shown in Alberta. We saw it certainly, in this area and other provinces as well, that when the lines become blurred between the physicians and the professionals in public health and the politicians, then things get off the rails. And in SARS, there was a little bit of that, and commissions said, look, you can't have the two mixed together. One has to be the lead, and the other has to play with them. And the lead that they suggested obviously was the chief medical health officer. So when you see those lines blurred, then the public begins to wonder, and this is what one of the commissions in Ontario found, was that the public then begins to wonder, how much do I believe is coming from the public health physician, the chief medical health officer, or the health minister, or the premier? And so whether it's true or not, just the perception was enough to cause some dissent, if you want to call it that, towards orders, issues, information disseminated by public health. Now that was way back, and they said, well, look, we need to correct that because it's going to happen again. And of course it's happened again. So I think there's a little bit of recovery that still needs to happen with public health. In fact, I was reading today where Alberta, because the number of cases there are starting to increase, that I don't know the exact proper name of the group, but it's the Northern Alberta Physicians Group of some sort. I forget it, what the exact name was, and apologies for that. But they wrote to certainly the health minister and maybe the premier, that they wanted the chief medical health officer to come out and speak to the public through the media and state how important it is for everybody in the province to get immunized, everybody to follow the instructions of public health when you're identified as a contact to measles, because there are things that you can do, actions that can be taken to help you prevent getting measles and or lessening the effect of them. And they said it's now spreading through all health zones in Alberta. The numbers are increasing. They're finding groups, areas where the vaccination rate for measles is actually very low, and it's just going to be a petri dish farm for growing measles. And so they're very concerned. So they wanted him to come out, and they wanted a province-wide immunization program to catch people up, because even if if you get your measles now, and then you don't need it down the road. So and the answer they got from the health minister was, she didn't think it was the time for him to come out, that it really wasn't to that state yet. Now you have physicians who are trying to deal with this, saying, we need this to be stated, we need him to come out, and we need a province-wide immunization campaign. And that's the response they got. So I think, go ahead, I'll take your, yep.
Yeah, so where does that leave us? Like, you talk about vaccination fatigue. Then we have people who are on the internet and social media platforms and getting all sorts of information that is totally out in left field somewhere. So how do we get that turned around? Because this outbreak is growing. And I can't remember if it was Ontario. It must have been Ontario, where they were actually now starting to send children home from school who did not have complete immunization records. And now, can you imagine the mother and the father and little Johnny or little Susie comes home, I can't go to school anymore. They're going to be hollering and jumping up and down because, I have rights. Well, so do the people who are around your child, who that child may be infecting. They have rights to be able to go in and feel relatively safe as well. So what do we need? Do we need governments to take some action and just say, you know what, you people can't do these things on your own and make reasonable decisions on your own, so we're going to have to make them for you?
Well, there was, I don't know if it still exists, but there was a part of the public health legislation in this province at one time that said that schools had to check the immunization records, and there was a certain group of immunizations that they had to have, or the principal was supposed to send them home or make sure that they had an appointment to get their immunizations. I don't know if it's still on the books. The public health changed in the last couple of years, but it was there. It was seen at some point in time to be that important, because we've known for years that when you go to school, well, it's a great festering place for everything to be passed around, and then you take it home. Now, for measles, the standard is your first immunization doesn't come until you're 1 year old. So you can bring something home and you're 7 or 8 years old, and if you got a little 10-month-old at home or 6-month at home who doesn't have that, even the immunization, the first immunization, then that baby is at one of the higher risk areas for complications from measles. So I think a couple things. Maybe we have to look at legislation. I know with human rights and things, whatever. I know with those who don't like vaccines, they're going to take exception to that. However, we do have to look at those who, through no choice of their own, maybe they're immune compromised, they can't get a vaccine, with the fact that we don't start giving them until they're 1 year old, and they're at high risk of complications as well. That maybe we have to look at this, and it kind of goes back to the COVID thing. Well, should we do this? Should we force this? Should this be a rule? But I think we have to look at that some way, and if Ontario's going to do that, well, good on them. I think the other thing too is public health has to come out, in my opinion, and we've got to make the case better. We have to make it clear. We have to make it better why vaccines are important. because, like I said, we're dealing with generations now that have never seen these diseases. And so to them, it's just a name that they probably forget. They think there's three diseases in one immunization needle. So, they'll get a card. But have they ever seen it? Do they understand the consequences of not getting that? Now, Gary, you and I are old enough that before polio vaccine became widespread and effective, we remember, and Eddie, you're probably too. You remember the pictures of the iron lungs, Gary? You know, that polio paralyzed your breathing muscles, and all you see were the kids' heads sticking out of these giant metal tubes, and the tube had a bellows in it that basically, pushed down your chest up and down, breathe for you. How many kids did we see walking around with the braces on the legs from being paralyzed permanently from polio? Well, nobody sees that. Nobody knows that anymore. And so that's my thing. Measles, that's a childhood disease. It's a rash. Well, I think I gave you examples as to why it's more than a rash. And it's so highly contagious that it's hard to control. And can you imagine when you have to do contact tracing, that if it's a 90% secondary infection rate, in other words, like I said, if you've been, exposed and you're not immune, that you're 90% chance of getting measles. And so we've got to make those points, and we have to make them, to me, with the people in charge, the people that are at the head. At the local levels, I'm sure they're doing it. They're fighting the good fight, contact tracing, telling what they need to do to reduce their chance of getting measles. I mean, if you catch it within 72 hours, somebody who's been exposed, you can get a measles injection. It'll either prevent it or lessen the disease if you do get it. Is greater than 72 hours, up to 6 days. So there's something called a measles immune globulin that's injected into you, and that can prevent you from getting measles. So, but there's other things to do, like to stay home and other things, even to the point that most of the jurisdictions will have a number to call, that if you think you have measles, don't just show up at the hospital emergency room. Don't show up at your doctor. Call first, and they will arrange for a special way for you to come in so you are not exposing other people. So that's how infectious this is. And there's a whole lot of steps that have to be taken, but the number of contacts that could be generated from one case, public health units are probably very, very busy, and I would say Ontario and Alberta in particular at this point in time. But I think, we need our leadership in public health to come out and step up and say, this is what we need, this is how important this is, and this is what we need to do, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to make it easy for you to get immunizations, because now we're going to have clinics here, clinics there. I know in New Brunswick, when we had our outbreak in the fall, it was concentrated in sort of one kind of more central area of the province. And they went out and they had sort of mobile clinics in certain key areas where they were trying to get that population. And that was to keep things under control. And by and large, they controlled it with 50 cases. And the outbreak was declared over in January. And a total of 50 cases. It's not under control in Alberta. It's going the other way. And they're at 43 already. And that was a few days ago. I'm not sure where they're at now. So,
Wayne, I don't buy into the vaccination fatigue. When you stop and think about some of the people who were hollering about, do I have to go get another shot? And some of these people are the same people who think nothing, absolutely nothing, about going and getting jabbed half a dozen different times with their cosmetic Botox. But yet you talk to them about something that's going to protect their health and people around them, and it's, no, not again.
Well, Gary, I think you guys are both right. It's a generational issue, because these individuals who go get their noses pierced, their ears pierced, and whatnot, right? I mean, obviously they're not afraid of sharp objects. I think there's a genuine sense of invincibility when it comes to the younger generation. A, it's not going to happen to me. B, if it does happen to me, I'll get through it somehow. So Wayne's absolutely right. It's a question of how do you educate these individuals that A, this is extremely important and it can be very critical to your health, let alone somebody else that you might jump in the subway with, right? For example. And then what they need to do to protect themselves and everyone else around them. How do you get that message to them? You're not going to get it to them through mainstream media, A. B, it's going to have to be in social media, kind of stuck between a couple of commercials where somebody's saying, hey, look at me, and then pop that up to them. So I think the government's going to have a very, very big challenge ahead of them in trying to convince these individuals that the measles are serious. This is not something to sneeze at, right? So I think that's part of the problem. It's just this whole feeling of invincibility, not going to happen to me, can't happen to me. Oh, it's going to happen to somebody else. That's a tough hill to climb.
Yeah. I think the other part of the problem is there's a credibility problem both at the political level and at the public health level in the wake of COVID, and some of the crossing of lines and pushback from the political level against public health. And in some cases, the politicians holding out public health as the scapegoat for whatever when the citizens push back on some things. So I think there's a credibility issue there as well that is going to take a lot of work to try and fix. And Wayne, you and I have had discussions about this in the past.
Well, there's an example in Alberta when a group of doctors are dealing with an outbreak in the northern part of the province. They send in a formal letter request to the minister to say, we need the chief medical health officer to come out and speak to the people and outline what's going on, how serious measles is, how important it is to get your immunization, how important it is to follow the instructions being given by your local public health unit, to give them some awareness and to show the chief medical health officer is there and things are in control as best they can be, and they're taking methods to do that. And when the health minister says, well, I don't think it's at that stage where, he has to come out and do that. I just cringe when I read that. So a public health physician, they're a physician. Their patients are the population, people of the province that they're in. And you have to talk to the people. You can't get around that. You have to talk to them, especially when it's province-wide like this. If it was one region and the local medical health officer was controlling it, fine. You probably don't need the chief to come out and talk province-wide. They may want to, but not necessarily if it's the local medical health officers dealing with that and dealing with the media and dealing with the population that they serve. But the patients of a public health physician are the people. And the chief, it's the people of the province. You wouldn't go to your doctor and expect not to hear from them or get a media release without even talking to them or answering questions. So I don't quite understand how we've gotten to this position. But it's, to me, it just adds to that thing, Gary, that you're talking about, is that those blurred lines in COVID between public health and politicians, we have to separate those. And we need public health to come back out and start banging the drum again. And Eddie, just to your point, I know that when they were publishing immunization stats, that the most faithful group to get their COVID and flu shots were those 65 and over. And then after that age category, it just tailed off. And however, I think the last flu shot last year, I think our chief medical health officer was saying he was a little disappointed that even it was tailing off in the older age groups. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but just from what I saw, that maybe it wasn't as great as people thought. He may have not said, I don't think he said that, so don't take that. But I think from what I saw, and I think that had to do with every 6 months, COVID, and then the second one is flu, get them together. And I think, Gary, that there could be a little bit of fatigue there. And I think that is it's a multifactorial reason why it's dropped off. But I think, and like we're old enough to remember, Eddie, I don't know, did you get smallpox before you went to school? Smallpox?
I had every pox, measles of every nationality you can imagine.
Right. And I can remember, Gary, you remember that before we went to school, we had to have smallpox injections.
Mm.
And it
Yeah,
left a big festering scab on your arm that to this day, many people still have the scar of that festering
yeah,
scab. But if
I
you
do.
remember, Gary, about a week after we had our injection, we had to go back to the nurses that gave them to us. And if you didn't have that scab, it said you were told it didn't take. You got another injection until they got that scab.
Yeah,
And I think you recall that. And so, but those were the days where even as youth, we could see what was happening around us. That if you didn't get your polio vaccine when it came out, those pictures of the iron lungs your friends who were still on leg braces and crutches. Um, yeah, the kids with measles that didn't do so well in hospital. It was very real to us. It was very real to our parents. And then as we could pass that down to our children, look, very important to get your child immunized because if you don't, it's far worse off if they get this than any immunization that you can get. And by and large, immunizations, I mean, they're the most cost-effective health intervention that we have. I think I saw that the cost of a 2-dose measles in Canada is $1.35. And I don't know what else, what else could be cheaper than that to prevent some of the things that I mentioned. Or, right now, as of last week, I didn't see today's data, there are 52 people hospitalized with measles in the measles outbreak in Ontario. 3 of them are in the ICU. So think of those poor people that are in that situation. But when you look at the cost of the vaccine versus the cost of that,
Or the ICU,
I don't think
exactly.
I don't think
yeah,
that's any comparison. And if you look on the states, Texas seems to be a hot spot, and 2 of the higher infected areas, if you want to call it that, are they have a lot of personal exemption people who choose not to get vaccinated, and already in that area, they've had 2 children die and an adult die, and the last child was an 8-year-old unimmunized last week.
wow.
Okay. All right, Wayne, thanks for the update and kind of putting it out there in terms we can understand and reminding those of us who do, as you say, remember the pictures of the iron lungs and those sorts of things. Just tweaking our memories to if we were even like if somebody said to you, you need an update for measles, which I received a couple of years ago because we were at an emergency room in St. John, and somebody on that weekend had come in and was, infected with measles, and they did the contact tracing. We received a phone call, and Deborah and I both had to go in and have our booster shots, and it took 10 minutes tops, and
Yeah,
and life went on. So people just give your heads a shake and stop being so selfish at times, because there are other people around you that you may not care if you get something like this, but you're going to spread it off to others that do care and that you may love, and it may cause them some serious consequences down the road.
yes.
Okay,
And
coming
Wayne,
up.
thanks. Just want to thank Wayne for that. That was extremely informative. Yeah, I've been through all that when I was a kid. I had my kids vaccinated and whatnot, and my grandchildren are vaccinated. But what both of you guys just reminded me is, I guess I'm in a little bit of a complacent mind. I should get my booster. It just never occurred to me. And again, it's this type of information, and that I think is missing in the general population. That getting boosters is a good thing, and I just had no idea that I needed to do that. I thought, hey, well, you know what? I had the shot when I was a kid. I'm good now. So I learned something very valuable today, Wayne. Thank you for that. Thanks for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And
Good.
Angelica says, good evening, gentlemen. Nice shirt, Eddie. Brings out the spring energy. And an interesting topic, very informative. And thank you for chiming in there. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Coming up, Liberals maintain their lead going into week 3 of the federal election campaign, and hope for the Habs. Now, the Night Talk domain and email are hosted by Web Hosting Canada, WHC, located right here in Montreal. If you're looking to move your hosting services from a US-based service, check out the affiliate link in the description below. And we thank you for doing that. Well, we're into week 3 of the federal election campaign. As a matter of fact, today marks the midway point. All candidates' nomination papers had to be filed by early Monday afternoon. One of the stories coming out of week 2 was the number of candidates vetted and tossed by the Conservatives and some by the Liberals as well. Key questions going into this week include: can the Liberals continue to hold on to their slim lead over the Conservatives? What issues do you, the voters, really care about? Let us know in the comments. And which leader is connecting or beginning to connect with you? So let's dive into that. Eddie, your thoughts as to what you had a chance to witness over the last couple of days?
Yeah, you know what? I've been looking at the poll numbers. I looked at the latest one that you posted today, and yeah, the lead seems to be closing for sure. I'm looking at 3 different polls that typically viewers might be looking at, from Angus Reid to the CBC poll tracker, and Nanos as well, which is a big one, and they all seem to indicate that the Liberals have dropped slightly at the expense of the Conservative Party. I think you and I, since the onset of the election, said that this was going to be a close election, and with the polls that we're seeing right now, there's a clear indication it's going to be a lot closer than it was when Prime Minister Carney came into power. So what am I seeing? I'm pretty much getting the same type of campaign speeches from the various leaders, from what I've been picking up on the news while I've been traveling. Nothing really new, nothing, I don't think anybody's hit any ball out of the ballpark yet. From what I've seen, there's been a little bit less mudslinging, which is something both you and I appreciate when there's a campaign. Let's get to the facts. Let's get to the issues, which was great to see. I mean, like you said, we're halfway through the campaign right now, so mudslinging will probably start towards the end of this whole thing. But all that to suffice it to say, all that, I believe that the election is going to be won next Wednesday and next Thursday. I believe you said the French debate's on Wednesday night, and the English debate's going to be on Thursday. I think that there is going to be the sign of who's going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. And you know what? I don't want to rule out Mr. Singh, but it's going to be an interesting conversation. Wednesday is going to be very important for the Bloc Québécois to flex their elbows. And the leader there is very, very articulate, knows his information, understands the political landscape of Quebec and Canada. So there's going to be a lot of brownie points for him to win in the French language broadcast. And come Thursday, when we have the English language debate, Poilievre, if he can contain himself to the business of Canada, what we need to do for Canada over the next 4 years and beyond, and stay away from rhetoric and stay away from Trumpistic, reality show debate style, I think he'll fare well. I believe Mr. Carney, over the short time he's actually been Prime Minister of Canada, has been handling himself extremely well in front of cameras, in front of microphones. And with every opportunity he does get, he seems to be gaining confidence in his ability to speak to Canadians. So that's going to work for him on Thursday as well. And especially his financial background. I mean, he can skate circles around Poilievre when it comes to the financial element of the concerns for Canadians in terms of where the economy is going. So polls are great. They give us an idea. You and I, 2-3 weeks back, were saying, "Wow, cannot believe the Conservatives lost 20 points beyond in terms of a gap in the polls to the Liberals." But it's getting close. But interestingly enough, Gary, you showed me a statistic today that spoke to beyond what party people would be voting for. They actually asked the question, who do you perceive as a preference for prime minister? And interestingly enough, we're talking about a 13-point lead. Carney had 47% in terms of preference for prime minister and 34% for Poilievre, right? So from the popularity side of it, Carney's definitely got a tremendous edge here. How much is that going to weigh in the actual election when that happens at the end of the month? I'm excited about what Canada can accomplish in the next 4 years. Liberal, conservative, as long as they're extremely clear as to what they propose to do for Canadians, how to make life for Canadians better than what we've seen in the last 10 years. I think is going to pretty much present us with the winner right after the debate. So I'm looking forward to watching that. Looking forward to coming down a few floors down and visit you and watch that with you. And we'll see. All hats are off right now, and good luck to all the candidates.
Carry on. One thing I wanted to mention was I looked at, I think it was Angus Reid poll from Monday. And,
yes, and I do have some graphics from that. So keep talking, and I'll probably put some up while you're talking.
Well, the one thing that caught my eye was that the number of committed Liberals now, those who are committed to voting Liberal, it was low at the start, even when Carney was popular, but it has risen to the point that the Conservatives always had that base. They always had that loyal base that, yep, doesn't matter. We're voting for Poilievre, and so he was well in the lead of that. But in the past week, 2 weeks, the Liberals are catching up to the Conservatives in terms of their people now are committing that yes, we're going to vote Liberal, and so I think that's a change in the way things have been up until this past week or so. That people were saying, yeah, we're thinking about Liberal, we kind of like Carney, but now there is this increase in commitment to voting Liberal. And seeing as you're able to vote now, that's a big thing. If you get the voters out that say they're going to commit, fine. And the other thing, too, is there's been this talk about Poilievre has these large crowds at his speaking points, or when he's making an announcement, or at a rally, and again, I think that goes back to he's had that base. It goes back to the Stephen Harper carryover of if you were conservative, you just keep following through, and Poilievre is in that that sort of vein of Harper in more ways than one, not always the best, however, and so I mean they're there. And with the Liberals, what they've gone through in the past couple of years, down in the polls, everybody was deserting the ship. And now, okay, this Carney guy's interesting. He seems to know what he's talking about. Yeah, I'm going to think about voting Liberal. But what this Angus Reid poll has now shown is that the number that are committing to voting Liberal is increasing, probably to levels that I don't think they've seen this much before an election. And so I think that's another sign that some of these side indicators like popularity of leader, popularity of who do you see would be the best to deal with Trump, both pointing in Carney's favor, are now translating into people saying, I'm voting Liberal, and that's who I'm committing to. Yes, I'm committing to that. And I think that's going to play an important role in this as well. I don't know what you guys think, but I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Well, first of all, just for people viewing, and we'd like to hear from you in the chat, have you made up your mind about who you're going to vote for? What issue matters most to you in this election? And do you trust any of the major party leaders right now? And that, it would be interesting to see if we get any feedback here tonight versus what we're seeing with these polls. But let's just have a quick look at this poll. This is from the Angus Reid poll that was released on Monday. Federal voting intention decided and leaning voters. And you can see the Conservatives had dropped off, and the Liberals had that big bump. And so far, the Liberals are maintaining that 46% level. The Conservatives had dropped off. They've come up to 38%. Then it's dropped off a bit again. But what, as you said, Wayne, one of the other graphs in this poll showed that the Liberal support was there at the beginning of the campaign, but a vast majority of that support was soft. In other words, people said, yeah, I'm kind of leaning Liberal, but I'm not 100% sure if I really want to go that way or not. And now that support is starting to firm up. And the Conservative support, their supporters have been there from day one. They are beginning to attract a few of the others who were maybe leaning Conservative, but not 100% sure. And so with it going in that direction, and the fact that they have managed to narrow the spread to about 5 to 6% for the Liberals now, the debates coming up next week are going to draw a lot of attention, and I think they really are going to be a real factor in the final decision. And this election is not going to be so much about the local candidates as it's really about the leaders and the whole thing around the way they're going to handle the occupant of the Oval Office and his tirades of, whatever hits him whenever he wakes up in the morning kind of thing. That's where it's going to sit. And in some respects, it's too bad it has to come to that, because the local candidate counts a lot. But in this case, it's again, I've said this before, we're at war. It's an economic war, but we are at war. So it's going to come out that the person we feel can handle it best is the one that we're going to be supporting. And very quickly, another graph from that Angus Reid poll, federal vote intention by region. Not surprisingly, in Alberta, the Conservatives have 54%, the Liberals 36%, and the NDP 7%. You move to BC, Conservatives 37%, the Liberals 48%, and the NDP 11%. And then you come across to Ontario, and the Liberals right now 53% versus 37% for the Conservative Party. Yeah. Move into Quebec, and you're looking at 39% for the Liberals, 22% for the Conservatives, and the Bloc at 32%. And the Bloc has been kind of soft in their support this time around, and they are in danger of losing some seats. And, so you go to Atlantic Canada, and a Liberal stronghold, 60% in favor of the Liberals, 32% for the Conservatives, and 6% for the New Democrats. Now, the other side of it is, you mentioned that rally, and it was a huge rally the other night in Edmonton for Poilievre, and police were estimating the crowd between 9,000 and 12,000 people. And that's great. But these rallies, I take with a grain of salt, because you get, first of all, Alberta is a fairly strong red area of the country. And secondly, when you have a rally, you bus in the troops from all over the province or wherever to fill the room, to make sure that there are all kinds of heads behind the leader when the leader is speaking. I'm sure there were a lot of dedicated Conservatives at that rally, but there were probably some who were, either on the fence or they were just there to see what was going on. And there were some people who were told, we need you there, jumped the bus and we're going to Edmonton for the rally. So I take those like with a grain of salt, really. So let's look at one more poll while we're at it here, or one more graph from the poll. Which of the leaders would make the best Prime Minister of Canada? And they're breaking it down by demographic here. And it's interesting. Carney is coming out right across the board between 49 is his lowest up to a high, 44% is his lowest up to a high of 53%. People feel that Carney would make the best leader, and that's male and female. 28 to 15% to a high of 37% feel Poilievre would be the person. And then you have teens in single digits for neither of them is a good option. And then you have, again, single digits and teens for not sure, can't say who would be the best leader. But it's interesting to see that overall, Carney has the lead in both male and female voters polled, and all age demos across the board. So I think that's very telling in a lot of ways as well. And let's see, I think we have a comment or two here to bring up as well. So let's go over here. And back here, and let's see where that comment goes. Yep, Monel. Yes, the Midas Touch Network on YouTube has also been calling Poilievre Maple MAGA, not going to help them. That is coming up a lot in conversations of late.
Yeah,
so,
it is.
Yeah. So anyway, and that's, I can't see that helping Poilievre in any way. But I don't know. What do you think, Eddie?
No, you know what? I mean, last week we spoke about the things the cons that would work against both Carney and Poilievre, and I mentioned last week that Poilievre he's got a history politically, so a lot of the decisions or the bills that he voted against that would have benefited the working class Canadian, often he voted against it. So, if that's going to come up in the debate or during the course of the rest of the campaign, that's certainly going to work against him. Some of these YouTube channels that are extremely popular, that are being watched by Canadians, even though it's more based on American politics and what's going on in the United States, a lot of Canadians are watching this. And Ben from Midas Touch, I mean, he's very articulate, very smart, very sharp. He fact checks everything before putting it on his podcast. I believe is pretty well versed with what's going on up here in Canada, and he's got his people that are watching the news lines and the feeds throughout Canada. That actually latched onto the fact that a lot of the policies and a lot of the rhetoric that Poilievre has been using kind of leans towards a Trump management style, if you want to call it, or management style, and that's not going to serve very well. It's not going to serve him very well today in the political climate we're in terms of our relationship with the United States, aka Donald Trump. So the more people see of that, which is a possibility of Mr. Poilievre not being able to fight against Donald Trump, but actually be an ally of his. You know what? That's a red flag that a lot of Canadians might say, no, I don't think I'd like to vote for the Conservatives, but I just don't like the way the leader has been presenting himself. Is he going to defend Canada, or is he going to further align with Trump policies? So I think that will work against him at some point. But we're going to see. I mean, the debate's going to tell a lot. Prime Minister Carney might actually raise that as an issue, and let's see how Mr. Poilievre responds to that. So, yeah, social networks, popular ones, social media can invariably work against any candidate. In this particular case, that certainly will work against Mr. Poilievre.
The other thing is just how tightly controlled the Conservative campaign is now when it comes to the media. Of course, they're not allowing any media to travel on the plane or buses
Oh,
with
that's right.
Polyev.
Yes. Mhm.
And then it's almost like a select group that gets in to cover, and then they have to submit questions, and four are called upon. You get a question and you don't get a follow-up. So it's very, very tightly controlled, and it's very similar to what Harper introduced when he was campaigning and then became prime minister. There was always a lot of friction between Harper and the parliamentary press gallery over that control. I sense the control with Polyev is even tighter, and it really kind of came home earlier this week, because the next morning after the big rally in Edmonton, a reporter asked him a question, and he said, "Well, you saw the numbers from the rally last night or something." I forget how he phrased the response, but it was along those lines. And of course, the reporter said, "I wasn't there because they weren't allowed in or weren't invited in." There's been some pushing and shoving of reporters by some of the campaign staff prior to Polyev's arrival. It's just, I don't get it. I really don't get it, and it makes me question where the mindset's going to be if, in fact, Polyev becomes prime minister. Are we going to be as tightly controlled in what we're getting from our government as what we see in some countries under communist rule and dictatorships? Because that seems to be some of what's going on here. To me, that's what it feels like. We're on the cusp, and
We're not at the end. We're not at the point that we're speaking state-controlled media, like a lot of what we're seeing in the United States right now. But shudder to thought something like that would happen here in Canada. I mean, It's almost, you don't want to say that they seem to be trying to control what's going on, state media control style. But, when you look between the lines, and Mr. Polyev is restricting press access to his campaign and whatnot. What are you doing that's not considered state control, trying to control media to the state, which is Canada in this particular case? That's playing with fire. That's when you told me about that last week, I couldn't believe my ears. Like, wow, this is actually happening. Wow.
And again, to make it clear, when the media travels on the plane with the candidate or on the bus, the media organizations are paying their way, whatever the price that is set by the campaign to help cover off the cost of the plane or the buses. The media organizations pay a fee to be on the bus or on the plane with the candidate. So it's not like the media are going along for a free ride. That's not the case at all. And you do lose now. The argument Polyev and the campaign made was, well, we're going to give local reporters more of a chance to ask questions. Okay, that can be done, though, by not controlling the number of people who are allowed in or who are allowed to ask one question, and after it's been submitted and approved. That can be done. You can still. I've covered a number of campaigns with federal leaders, and you have the local media. I always managed to get a question in if I wanted to get a question in at the time, or a question and a follow-up. I never had any issue. So I don't buy into that at all.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things. And as Monel just posted here, let's bring it up. Or do they want their own Fox News? Well, you're not so far off the mark. but I'm not going to
I,
put words into the mouths of the Conservative campaign.
to tell you quite honestly, Gary, I'm actually surprised you're not jumping up and down higher in your seat as a result of seeing this type of news. That there's a restriction in terms of uh, big line news organizations not having the necessary access to all the candidates the way we've traditionally had. So I'm kind of surprised you're not jumping up and down your seat a little more, or you're just being calm and cool and reserved right now in terms of what's going on.
Yes, and 3 weeks ago, when it was announced that they weren't going to have the media on the plane, I wasn't surprised by any stretch of the imagination, but I was pissed.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
yeah, you weren't around for that.
No, that's what happens when you go away for a bit, and I'm sorry I wasn't there for you, bud. Oh,
I dealt with it, but I just anyway. Um, I coming back to the debates. I really do think the debates are going to be the pivot point in the campaign, and
you as well.
you know, I we have a clip coming up of Carney in a moment related to the tariff wars, and every time I see that guy step up to the prime minister's podium, the more prime ministerial he looks and sounds and conducts himself, and looking like a true leader. And I heard an
Right.
interesting comment tonight watching one of the panels on the supper time shows, and one of the people taking part in the panel talking about the debates, and they were saying, it's going to be interesting to watch Carney in the debate because he's
Mm-hmm.
not used to a political, taking part in a political debate. Poilievre is great in the House of Commons, but will he be able to hold up on the debate stage? And the guy who's probably going to be most comfortable is Singh, because he has a lot of experience on these debate stages. So it will be interesting to watch that dynamic. Although I have to say, watching Carney in the so-called debate that they had prior to the Liberal leadership vote, he did okay. You could tell that from a political standpoint, he
Mm-hmm.
still had a lot to learn and a few tools to sharpen for sure. But I think he can hold his own. So it's going to be interesting to watch how Poilievre in particular reacts to him.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those situations where Poilievre at this stage of the game has nothing to lose and everything to gain if he goes after Carney big time. However, as this person I was watching tonight said, it'll be really interesting to see if Poilievre can get beyond 2 and 3 word phrases and put it all together in a straight on debate attack on Carney. So I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
It's like waiting for last year for the Oilers in the Stanley Cup, the next game. I can't wait.
Yeah, exactly.
I just can't wait for this.
It's going to be interesting days ahead of us.
Yeah, oh, very much so, very much so. And the promises are still rolling out. But again, it's and we could have highlighted promises tonight, but they're there.
That's a whole show.
Yeah, exactly. And some of them, there's very little difference between what the Conservatives are pledging and what the Liberals are pledging. So
yeah, the numbers might be a little different, but the ideas are pretty much all the same.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. So it's going to be interesting, and it's going to, I'm going to find the French debate really interesting too. And I love watching Blanchette. I
Yeah.
just love watching him and his demeanor and the way he delivers his lines and the way he delivers them in English in particular. He's very sharp and he's some of his lines are really very sharp, very cutting in a lot of ways, but he does it in such a refined way that you don't feel the sword going in until after he's left. You realize, oh, geez, he got me.
There's a knife in my back, yeah.
Yeah, I quite enjoy watching him. So anyway, that should prove to be interesting. All right. I did have a chance, to catch up with Christian in Switzerland yesterday. However, we'll save that to the end because the conversation has taken a bit of a turn because it was a week ago that the U.S. president stepped up his trade wars, unleashing tariffs on every country doing business with the United States, including one inhabited by only penguins. Stock markets around the world tanked with trillions of dollars lost so far. And today, the Oval Office upped the ante early this morning with China by imposing a new round of reciprocal tariffs, bringing the total to 104%. Now, that's 104%. Late morning, early afternoon, all of a sudden, the occupant of the Oval Office flip-flops once again and says he's pausing the reciprocal tariffs, the global reciprocal tariffs that he announced last week on his so-called Liberation Day. And of course,
so he's,
the markets
retracting his Rose Garden speech.
Yeah, and the markets bounce back accordingly. And we'll get into it in a minute because I really want to play this clip of the Prime Minister because, again, he took time off from the campaign trail to attend to his role as Prime Minister. And Mark Carney last week responded to the latest round of tariffs on automobiles with another statement confirming our relationship with the U.S. as we knew it is over.
The economy is fundamentally different today than it was yesterday. The system of global trade anchored on the United States that Canada has relied on since the end of the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped to deliver prosperity for our country for decades, is over. Our old relationship of steadily deepening integration with the United States is over. The 80-year period when the United States embraced the mantle of global economic leadership, when it forged alliances rooted in trust and mutual respect, and championed the free and open exchange of goods and services, is over. Canada is ready to take a leadership role in building a coalition of like-minded countries who share our values. We believe in international cooperation. We believe in the free and open exchange of goods, services, and ideas. And if the United States no longer wants to lead, Canada will.
The guy, just watching him, impresses me as a leader and as the Prime Minister. I haven't really felt that way about a Prime Minister for at least a decade, and maybe a little bit before that. So statesman-like. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. He does come across as a statesman. And to me, his cool, even-handed approach gets his zingers in, but in a very calm way, and he moves on.
Yeah.
You know what? I can understand why people are looking at him as the choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I still have a few questions in my mind, as we've discussed on so many occasions over the last couple of weeks.
Right.
Are we seeing all of the real Mark Carney?
Mm-hmm.
Is he actually more centrist as far as his liberal beliefs are, or will he go back more to the left once the election is over and he gets in with a permanent government? That's one part I'm not sure about, and maybe I'll get my answer in watching and listening to what he says during the debates. I'm not sure, but as far as presentation there, you could not ask for a more statesman-like figure to represent your country.
Yeah, absolutely. After I watched that clip myself, I both my wife and I watched that and said, "Wow, that was another word I would add, an adjective. It was powerful, very statesman-like, very prime ministerial, but there was power and purpose to what he said." And what I was going to mention before is when former Prime Minister Trudeau announced he was going to resign, and then we started getting into the Liberal convention. I think week on week for about 3 or 4 episodes, Gary, you and I had said, "Would the real Mark Carney please step up? Where are you?" And with every passing week, we have been saying that, but not with the same level of forcefulness. After watching that last week, I really thought that a good portion of the real Mark Carney had just presented himself, not just to Canada, not just to the United States, but to the world. And he seemed calm, composed, sent a clear message to a global powerhouse, being the United States of America, more directly to Donald Trump. And he made it very clear that regardless, I mean, just in one sentence, our relationship with the United States is over. He's not saying it's over just for the next month, for the next 2 years, or for the next 4 years. He's looking beyond that. Now, that was a very powerful statement to make because it sent a clear message to the world that Canada is going to be moving away from Big Brother, which is a very powerful message. So I think that Mr. Carney, Prime Minister Carney, is getting towards that point where Canadians will know who he is. And I think you're absolutely right, Gary. The rest of his persona and his character and his thinking, how far left is he from center, is going to come out at both debates next week. They have to come out. Even they're going to come out just by the way that Mr. Singh and Mr. Poilievre are going to question him. And the way he responds to them will define him as the prime minister in waiting for the next 4 years, or the prime minister, lame duck prime minister for the next 4 years. Is going to clearly define whether A, he's going to win, and B, if he does win, whether it's going to be a majority of government or not. So at this particular point in time, when I'm looking at what I've seen in terms of presentation, conduct over the last 6 months, Poilievre on the floor in the chambers and so on and so forth, it's going to come down to how these guys present themselves to the viewership, the viewers of the debate. One false move in terms of Prime Minister Carney speaking too far left or Poilievre speaking too far right will be their demise. So they have to be very careful not to get away from that sweet spot of moderation in the middle. So I'm just going to, Gary, 100%, very moving, very inspirational speech by Carney in addressing the tariffs from the United States.
And when you think about it, Eddie, the politics of it aside, we had the Prime Minister of Canada last week coming out and saying, okay, if the United States is going its own way and relinquishing its role as the leader in the free world, we're ready to take over the leadership and move on. And That's a pretty ballsy statement
It
when you
is.
think about it.
That's a powerful statement. He made
Yeah.
a statement to the world, not just to the United States.
Yeah, exactly. And in the meantime, he's still playing it straight down the middle as far as how he's reacting or how the government is reacting to the various tariffs. It's very, very surgical, and they're not overreacting. They're clarifying what we're being charged and for what, and then the plan is there, and they'll roll out the next portion of the plan to reciprocate whatever those tariffs are. So I think we're going in the right direction that way, but already there are a number of layoffs, and the unemployment rate was up last month. And I saw a headline today where there are more companies laying off more people in Canada, and they're blaming it on the tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
Meantime, the Buy Canadian movement is having the desired impact on American businesses, because a lot of Canadian companies buying from American suppliers are cutting their orders because people are not buying anything that has a stars and stripes stamped on it.
Yeah.
So, and that's going to be a good thing down the road, because that's going to allow more Canadian entrepreneurs to flourish and start filling the voids that have been left by this.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much longer. I'm sorry to say that I think we're going to have. He's got how many months left? We're in month 4, so we still have 3 years and 8 months, and I think it's going to be a new episode of the Oval Office reality show every week. And the flip-flopping that's going on, does he not realize that not only is he playing with people's finances and their retirement finances, but he's playing with their heads as well?
He doesn't care, Gary. I mean, he just doesn't care. It's a game to him. He just doesn't, I'm sorry, he just doesn't give a shit. Literally.
Yeah, exactly. There's no other way of putting it. So, if you have any sort of thoughts on the tariff wars and the stock market reaction.
It's, you know what, it's important for myself and my wife to watch, just so we get a grasp of what's going on in the United States, because they still have a tremendous influence in what goes on in the world, even though they're no longer the leaders of the free world. I don't think anybody can debate that outside the United States, or even a lot of people in the United States. What do I have to say on that? It's just constant flip-flopping. It certainly, to the rest of the world, makes it look like he's just playing a game. Like you said, he's playing with people's heads. Okay. And I was kind of trying to summarize my thoughts over the last few weeks, right? What's going on with this flip-flopping? Why wasn't Canada and Mexico as part of the reciprocal list? What's going on with Mexico and Canada now? Why is he flip-flopping so much? How come certain countries weren't on the list? In terms of Canada and Mexico not being on that reciprocal list, being behind closed doors, and you and I will probably never ever find out. Claudia Sheinbaum, she knows her stuff at Mexico. She knows what she's doing. She has a plan, a counter-Trump plan. And I believe that Comrade Trump is genuinely afraid of her. Okay? She's pretty much saying, oh, you want to do this to us? No problem, go ahead. Because she knows that a huge part of the American economy is based on labor from Mexico, and labor in Mexico from a manufacturing perspective. And she's also going to be opening up one of the largest refineries in North America at the end of this year and they're no longer going to have to be dependent on American oil or American money from oil refinery, because they ship out a lot of crude to them. They're going to do this all on their own. They are going to be energy self-sufficient. This lady knows what she's doing, and I believe Comrade Trump is afraid of her. On the Canadian side, we're never going to know the exact details of that telephone conversation between Prime Minister Carney and Trump. I mean, Comrade Trump started calling Prime Minister Carney by his first name. Yes, Mark and I had a great conversation. It was this, and Carney came out and gave, I believe, that speech that you just showed. Okay, and Prime Minister Carney was all business. I have a feeling that there was a very, very clear message that Carney put into Comrade Trump's ear that scared the crap out of him. Okay? Hence a lot of this flip-flopping that's going around, and the fact that we weren't put in that initial reciprocal list. Okay? So a lot of things were going between my head and my wife's head. I mean, I think if you don't mind, I'm going to talk about those 7 areas that I thought might be going on, and we can consider it a joke or not. But here's my opinion. Point number 1, Trump flinched and he's delaying the tariffs for 90 days. Option 2, he did this on purpose just for poop and giggles. As Manel mentioned last week, he's a megalomaniac. Okay. 3, he had a clear plan to tank the markets so that his billionaire buddies and himself can buy low and make a fortune at the expense of everybody else. Number 4, Trump succumbed to internal pressures from CEOs in the United States. Number 5, maybe he had a death threat. Now, that threat could be death in itself or death to his finances in his pocketbook. Okay. 6, Elon Musk told him to stop. President Musk told him to stop the tariffs. And then 7, which I'm sure you and I and most of our listeners are going to appreciate, number 7, all of the above, and he's just an idiot. So I don't know how else to sum it up, Gary, because you go through this list, and this list can be superimposed on the White House's daily activity. At least 4 out of the 7 will be bang on. So
yeah. Any given hour of the day.
Any given hour. So, I mean, how can people that are interested in what is going to happen to Canada moving forward not be interested in listening to that shit show in that Oval Office on a daily basis? It's scary, A, and B, at the same time, it's entertainment and it offers a release, whether it's anger, whether it's laughing at him or whatever, it offers a release because, you know what, it's been extremely stressful for a lot of people over the last little while, especially the ones that have retirement investments. And a lot of mutual funds are based in American organizations and exchanges. So, you know what, Gary, I don't know what to make of it. For myself as a Canadian, I need a strong leader that will take us into the next era, an era of not having to depend on the United States of America. That's what I need. And I think a lot of Canadians need that. And whoever takes the helm after the election, you're going to have 39.5 million Canadians on your back that are relying on you. So let the best man win, defend this country because it deserves to be defended.
Okay. Well, as I said earlier, I did catch up with our European contributor, Christian Falk, yesterday to get a sense of the impact of the U.S. president's global tariffs that he announced last week. And so even though there has been somewhat of a change as to what the U.S. president is doing, he's put a pause on those global tariffs, and I'm sure the Penguins are happy about that. I feel that there's some insight here anyway that it's well worth just having a listen to what Christian had to say. So let's roll that. Over to Europe we go now with our contributor Christian Falk to find out exactly in the week following the expansion of Trump's trade war, just how it's being met in Europe overall. Christian, thanks for joining us again today.
Thanks.
What's happening right now in Europe as far as the expanded tariffs, trade tariffs that Trump has thrown a blanket over the world almost?
Well, we can say it in one word. There's a question mark on everyone here. Everyone here in Europe is confused what the US government strategy is. And why shouldn't we be confused? Because even Trump's close advisors are lost. Yeah. So the overall tone is that the European leaders would prefer to negotiate than to retaliate, but and emphasizing all the time that we're ready to sit on the negotiation table with Mr. Trump, President Trump. We're reaching out to them, but we're waiting now for response. What happened today as well is like, I don't know if everyone saw like the response from Elon Musk, where he was proposing a zero like a trade zone, a free zone between the US and Europe, which everyone here said is it's a joke. This is already what the European France's trade minister proposed last year. So the response of German economy minister said like there is no comment on this. The US first has to take care of the tariffs which are imposed right now before we're talking about a zero tariff solution. Yeah, that's basically the all over tone at the moment.
The other question is, though, Christian, when you look at any kind of an agreement with the U.S. president, what's it really worth? We had an agreement that he negotiated during his first term in office with Mexico and Canada, called it the greatest deal ever, the best deal. And here we are, 8 years later, and he's just basically torn it up because he's ignored it completely. And now I'm not even sure, and I'm sure, I don't believe a lot of other people are sure as to what exactly he wants. Does he want a new agreement, or does he want to just keep pushing tariffs and trying to force people to set up shop in the U.S.? I'm not sure. And if we do negotiate a new deal, how long is it going to last before we're back into another trade war? Those are all questions that a lot of people on the street are asking, and I'm sure behind the scenes in the markets, financial people are asking those same sorts of questions. And now you're totally exposed to it in Europe.
Yes, definitely. Let's put it like this. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she said, like, we have different options. They offered yesterday a zero tariff agreement, which would exclude like industrial goods traded between the European Union and the US to be tariff-free. That was the proposal. We don't know on how the US will react on that. In case they want to agree to the deal, yeah, we have an agreement, but there are other preparations for countermeasures. So as said, to retaliate is the last measurement, like the last step the European Union wants to go. But they also said that they're preparing countermeasures. So there's a package which would target like goods worth $26 billion coming in from the US to the European Union, and imports which would then impose by the European Union tariff of 25%. There was a funny incident though, like the 25% would not go only on industrial goods, but also on everyday consumption goods. And Trump said in one word, he said, like, if you're putting a tariff on U.S. bourbon on it, he will put tariffs of 200% on all alcoholic beverages coming from the European Union to the U.S. So then all of a sudden, France panicked as one of the biggest wine producers in the world, and pushed the European Union not to put tariffs on U.S. bourbon. But this is how ridiculous the whole discussions become at this stage. Yeah.
And of course, the French wine industry for a number of years had kind of bottomed out, and over the last couple of years has really been bouncing back. I'm sure here in Canada, I know we seem to be receiving a larger selection of French wines, and in the articles I've read have indicated that the French wine industry is bouncing back now worldwide. So this would be the last thing that they would need.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Yeah, there are other preparation of countermeasures, and we're talking about one countermeasure. It's called ACI, and this is called the Anti-Correlation Instrument. It's hard to explain, but basically it's an instrument which gives the European Union as a whole more freedom in order to put tariffs on everything which is coming from the US, especially, and that's why they call it the bazooka or the nuclear option, which would include also to tax tariffs, banking, service providers, everything which is coming from the US. So we're not clear in the European Union if that's what we really want to do. And the European Union just tries to see it to throw it to the US more than a threat. That would be really the last resort. And we're not all aligned here in the European Union. Look at Ireland. Ireland is one of the major hubs for US companies on the service sector, on the banking sector. Everything is routed via Ireland. So for them, they say it's a no from their side because it would heavily impact also the economy of Ireland. But you see, you need to be really sensitive in which direction you're going also with tariffs from our side, because it's all interlinked, intertwined. Yeah, but there are options the European Union has, and they will not fear back to take those measurements if needed. Yeah.
Now, is one of those options under consideration expanding more trade links with Canada, for example?
Oh, definitely. Europe, we had the discussion last time where we were looking into the options if Canada could be potentially partner of the European Union. The European Union is looking for new partners, and we're not only talking about China. China is another thing. Of course, we're strengthening our relationship, but we're reaching out hands also to South Korea, South America, and South Africa. In terms of Canada, of course, the problem is really not the problem. We're already looking into zero tariff solutions with Canada, and we know there's already a special agreement between Quebec and Bavaria here in Germany. They have already great trade relations, and we just try to extend it through the whole European Union.
Okay, one more thing before we go, and that is there any more interest in the Canadian federal election than what we've seen in the past?
At the moment, the whole media is covering, unfortunately, Trump and the US politics. And thus, this is it's over, we're not hearing anything else at the moment. Just tariffs and where the markets are going, I have to admit. Yeah.
Okay. Christian, thanks for taking the time out to speak with us and bring us up to date from a European standpoint.
Thank you so much, Gary.
That was interesting. So what Christian said at the end, Comrade Trump is a glory hog, I guess, huh?
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, man. Oh, boy. That was so interesting.
No kidding.
Alrighty,
well, despite the snow and cool temps yesterday, we are in spring, and that means NHL playoffs are just around the corner. What does that mean for the Montreal Canadiens? Well, before I hand it off to Eddie, let's see what he had to say on October 9th, 2024. Okay, well, let's just check fire there for a minute. We do have a small technical issue.
And if I remember, 80%, they lost something like 27 games last year just by one goal, which is a significant. They're all through draft plan, and there has been a plan since Mr. Gorton arrived in the scene. They're executing. And back then they said, we're looking at 4 to 5 years before we can even talk about contending for a Stanley Cup. Well, I believe this is year number 4 for them, and they're already talking about being in the mix. Are they Stanley Cup? Quality right now? No, not yet. They need a little bit more grooming. They need to get a little bit more weight, and they still need to get a little height on the team, because when it comes playoff time, that's when the big boys come out to play.
So, Eddie, and sorry about that little glitch. I kept pushing the button, and the button wasn't responding. But we got the thrust of the comment, and that was back in October.
Right.
So,
episode 4.
What has changed since then, and have you changed your mind?
Somewhat, yeah. You know what, Gary? I reviewed that clip in its entirety today. First of all, for our viewers, a correction that we're not in year number 4 of rebuilding. This is year number 3. Okay, so I just want to correct myself there. But you know what, Gary? I am pleasantly surprised by how these young men are playing hockey with passion and playing hockey with a purpose, and they never, ever, ever give up. Just to the point, to give you an idea, about 5 or 6 games ago, we were kind of singing. The fat lady was starting to sing. They were, I think, like 8 points or 9 points behind the Ottawa Senators. And by the way, there's 2. They're vying for a playoff spot along with Ottawa. They're both in wild card positions. Ottawa's in the first wild card position, and the Montreal Canadiens, believe it or not, have the second wild card position. So during the last 10 games, just to give you an idea of the tenacity, in the last 10 games, the Canadiens have won 6 straight. So their last 10 games, there's 6 wins, 3 losses, and 1 tie, one overtime point. That is absolutely remarkable. They're at a point right now where they have the final playoff spot in the Eastern Conference almost locked up. Mathematically, not yet. The Canadiens have 4 games left. All they need to do is lose the next 4, because they are 8 points ahead of the Rangers, the Red Wings, the Islanders, and Columbus. So yes, they're ahead of the game right now. Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes were saying 5 years. It's a 5-year rebuild program. We're in year number 3, and they have almost secured a playoff spot. And not only that, to make things interesting, Gary, because I know you're a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, kind of, since you're Montreal, you're kind of getting converted here. Right now, if Montreal stays in that final wild card spot, the first round of the playoffs is going to be Montreal versus the Washington Capitals. Now, here's the beauty. Montreal is going to play the Ottawa Senators this upcoming Friday. Okay. Today, they are 3 points behind the Ottawa Senators. This can come right down to the wire. If the Canadiens surpass the Ottawa Senators and flip wild card spots, guess who the Montreal Canadiens play in the first round? The Toronto Maple Leafs. Bring them on. Bring them on.
Oh,
yeah.
man. Can you imagine?
Yeah, extremely exciting. I mean, the last time the Canadiens were in the playoffs is when they made a run for the Stanley Cup in the final series. They lost to Tampa, but they eliminated the Toronto Maple Leafs in 7 games. They were down 3-0, pushed back, and took the series 4-3. Now, I think also back in our episode in October, episode 4, I was really hoping the Maple Leafs would advance. Like you were saying, they've been rebuilding since 1967. Quote unquote, Gary, this is exactly what you said. You know what? It would make for excellent hockey. May the best team win. That would be a fabulous series again. And I believe the Montreal Canadiens, based on what I've seen in French media, this is exactly what they want. They want a matchup with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Neither team has had their numbers on each other this year, so they have one more game this year. So I think that's going to be a telltale sign of what the last few games mean to both teams. It would be a fantastic series. And like I said, if they catch Ottawa, it's going to be a Habs Maple Leaf series. And then the inevitable joke I have to give our viewers right now is what do the Maple Leafs have in common with the Titanic? They're both great until they hit the ice. Oh, I'm sorry I have to throw that one in there, Gary. But
ouch.
Look, you know what? A remarkable achievement by the Canadiens. The Toronto Maple Leafs as well. A remarkable achievement. They got bigger, they got tougher, they got meaner this year. Okay, that's what the Maple Leafs needed to do. That's what I said they needed to do at the beginning of the season. They got goaltending. The Maple Leafs this year can take it all the way if their core four show up for the playoffs where they usually disappear. So I'm hoping the best for the Maple Leafs. I'm hoping even better outcome for the Montreal Canadiens, and it's an exciting time. It really is, and it livens up the city, livens up the province, it livens up a lot of Canada because there are a lot of Montreal Canadian fans throughout the rest of Canada. So you had asked me whether Canadians are going to make the playoffs on episode 4. I didn't think they would. You had asked me for a bold prediction in terms of who the final 4 were going to be. So far, back then I said Edmonton and Dallas in the West. They're both very, very good teams this year. They're both in the playoffs. I said the Florida Panthers in the East. I also said the New York Rangers, and the Canadiens are 8 points ahead of them right now, so that's not going to happen. I said Leafs on the outside because they didn't know what they were going to do in terms of improving their team, and Vancouver. They're probably not going to make it. But the nice thing about hockey in Canada, right now 5 of 6 Canadian teams are vying to make it to the next season, which is the playoffs. So thank you for asking me in my opinion. Thank you for asking me to look back on episode 4. And you know what? I look a lot better today than I did back then.
And you know what? There's no better rivalry in North America than the Leafs and the Habs. No better rivalry.
Absolutely.
It's the top rivalry. Doesn't matter if you're talking.
Great for the country.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter what sport you're talking. When you get down to the Habs and Leafs, man, that's it. Like all hell breaks loose for sure. So looking forward to it. And the Habs have 4 games left between now?
4 games left. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. It's going to be really, really interesting to watch. Okay. That's it for tonight. It's been a busy one with politics and measles and trade chaos and playoff hopes. We've covered it all. Thanks to Wayne and Christian for their contributions, and a special thanks to you for your support. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And let's keep the conversation going in the comments below, especially if you are viewing at a later time. We do try to respond to all of them. Night Talk returns in 7 days. I'm Gary MacDonald. Good night. Good night, Eddie.
I'm Eddie Scarlett. Good night.